Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my JavaScript series. I hope you're doing great and learning JavaScript consistently. In our previous video, we learned how JavaScript reads and updates HTML attributes using getAttribute and setAttribute. Today, we're going to continue with changing HTML attributes part 2. In this video, we'll learn two more important DOM methods, removeAttribute and hasAttribute. These methods help us remove HTML attributes and check whether an attribute exists on an HTML element. You'll see these methods used in forms, login pages, shopping websites, banking applications, and many other real-world projects. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to use these methods with practical coding examples. In this video, we'll learn what is removeAttribute, what is hasAttribute, syntax, practical coding examples, outputs, real-world examples, common beginner mistakes, and interview tips. So let's get started. Section 1. What is removeAttribute? Let's first understand what removeAttribute means. As the name suggests, removeAttribute is used to remove an HTML attribute from an HTML element. Sometimes we don't want to update an attribute. Instead, we want to remove it completely. That's exactly what removeAttribute does. Once JavaScript removes the attribute, the browser immediately updates the web page. This method is commonly used to remove attributes like disabled, hidden, read-only, required, placeholder, and title. Simply remember, remove. Attribute removes an HTML attribute from an element. Section 2. Why removeAttribute is important. Imagine you're filling out a registration form. Initially, the Submit button is disabled. After entering all the required information, JavaScript removes the disabled attribute. Now the button becomes clickable. No web page refresh. JavaScript simply removes the attribute. That's the power of removeAttribute. Section 3. Syntax. Now let's learn how to use removeAttribute in JavaScript. The syntax is very simple. Element dot. removeAttribute, attribute name. Here element is the HTML element you've selected, and attribute name is the name of the attribute you want to remove. Let's understand this with some practical examples. Section 4. removeAttribute. Practical coding examples. Here example 1. Remove disabled attribute. HTML example. Here we've created a button element. The ID is btn, which helps JavaScript identify this button. The disabled attribute makes the button inactive, so users cannot click it. The text Submit is displayed on the button. In the next step, we'll use removeAttribute to remove the disabled attribute and make the button clickable. JavaScript example. Let button equal to document.getElement by ID btn. Button.remove, attribute disabled. Output. Before JavaScript runs, Submit button is disabled. After JavaScript executes, Submit button becomes clickable. Explanation. Here, JavaScript first selects the button using getElement by ID, then remove. Attribute disabled removes the disabled attribute. Since the attribute no longer exists, the browser automatically enables the button. No page refresh is needed. Everything happens instantly. Example 2. Remove placeholder. HTML. Example. Here we've created an input field where the user can enter their username. The ID is username, which helps JavaScript select this input field. The placeholder attribute displays the text, enter username inside the input box as a hint for the user. In the next step, we'll use removeAttribute to remove the placeholder attribute so the hint text disappears. JavaScript example. Let input equal to document.getElement by ID username. Input.remove attribute placeholder. Output before JavaScript. Input shows enter username. After JavaScript, the placeholder text disappears. Explanation. Here, JavaScript removes the placeholder attribute. Because the attribute no longer exists, the placeholder message is removed from the input box. Section 5. Real-world examples of removeAttribute. Let's see where removeAttribute is used in real projects. Example 1, online registration form. Initially, the Submit button is disabled. After the user fills all required fields, JavaScript removes the disabled attribute, making the button clickable. Example 2, Amazon. A product is temporarily out of stock. The Buy Now button is disabled. Once the product becomes available, JavaScript removes the disabled attribute, allowing customers to purchase the product. Example 3, banking website. OTP verification is required. Until the OTP is verified, the Continue button remains disabled. After successful verification, JavaScript removes the disabled attribute, allowing users to proceed. Section 6. What is hasAttribute? Now let's learn another useful method. hasAttribute. As the name suggests, hasAttribute checks whether an HTML element contains a specific HTML attribute. Instead of reading or changing the attribute, it simply checks if that attribute exists. If the attribute exists, JavaScript returns true. If the attribute doesn't exist, JavaScript returns false. Simply remember, hasAttribute checks whether an attribute exists or not. Section 7. Why hasAttribute is important? Let's understand with a simple example. Imagine you're filling out an online form. Before submitting, JavaScript checks whether the input field has the required attribute. If it exists, the browser performs validation. If not, the form submits normally. Section 8. Now let's learn the syntax of hasAttribute. The syntax is very simple. Element.hasAttribute attribute name. Here, element is the HTML element you've selected, and attribute name is the name of the attribute you want to check. If the attribute exists, JavaScript returns true. If the attribute doesn't exist, JavaScript returns false. That's all there is to it. Now let's understand this better with some practical coding examples. Section 9. hasAttribute practical coding examples. Example 1, check required attribute, HTML example. Here we've created an input field for an email address. The ID is email, which helps JavaScript identify this input field. The required attribute makes the field mandatory before submitting the form. In the next step, we'll use hasAttribute to check whether the required attribute exists. JavaScript example. Let input equal to document.getElement by ID, email. Console.log input. hasAttribute required. Output. When JavaScript runs, the console displays true because the required attribute exists. Explanation. JavaScript first selects the input field using getElement by ID, then hasAttribute required checks whether the required attribute is present. Since the attribute exists, JavaScript returns true. Example 2, check placeholder attribute, HTML. Example. Here we've created an input field. The ID is username. Notice that this input field does not contain a placeholder attribute. Now JavaScript will check whether that attribute exists. JavaScript example. Let input equal to document.getElement by ID, username. Console.log input.hasAttribute, placeholder. Output. The console displays false because the placeholder attribute does not exist. Explanation. JavaScript checks for the placeholder attribute. Since the attribute isn't available, JavaScript returns false. Section 10. Real-world examples. Let's see where hasAttribute is used in real projects. Example 1. E-commerce website. Before displaying a product image, JavaScript checks whether the image has an alt attribute. If the attribute exists, the image is displayed normally. Otherwise, a default description can be shown. Example 2. Online examination portal. Before submitting an exam, JavaScript checks whether the answer field contains the required attribute. If it exists, the browser validates the answer before submission. Example 3. User profile page. Before displaying a user's profile picture, JavaScript checks whether the image has a src attribute. If the attribute exists, the profile picture is displayed. Otherwise, a default profile image is shown. Section 11. Common beginner mistakes. Mistake 1. Trying to remove an attribute before selecting the HTML element. Always select the element first. Mistake 2. Misspelling attribute names. For example, writing disable instead of disabled. Mistake 3, expecting removeAttribute to delete the HTML element. It only removes the specified attribute. Mistake 4, confusing hasAttribute with getAttribute. Remember, hasAttribute only checks whether an attribute exists. It does not return its value. Mistake 5, using hasAttribute to change attributes. It only returns true or false. To change attributes, use setAttribute. Section 12, Interview Tips. A common interview question is, what is the difference between removeAttribute and setAttribute? Answer, setAttribute creates or updates an HTML attribute. removeAttribute removes an HTML attribute. Another common interview question is, what does hasAttribute return? Answer, it returns true if the attribute exists, otherwise false. Another common interview question is, when should you use hasAttribute? Answer, whenever you need to check whether an HTML element contains a particular attribute before performing an action. Summary. Today we learned another important concept in JavaScript DOM manipulation. Changing HTML attributes, Part 2, we covered what is removeAttribute, why removeAttribute is important, what is hasAttribute, why hasAttribute is important. Syntax, practical coding. Examples, outputs, real-world examples, common beginner mistakes, and interview tips. Now you understand how JavaScript can remove HTML attributes and check whether attributes exist, making web pages more dynamic and interactive. Outro. Now you have a complete understanding of JavaScript DOM manipulation, changing HTML attributes. In the next video, we'll learn one of the most exciting topics in JavaScript DOM manipulation, event handling. We'll cover click events, double-click events, mouse events, keyboard events, input events, practical coding examples, real-world projects, common beginner mistakes, and interview questions. If you found this video helpful, like this video, share it with your coding friends, subscribe for more JavaScript tutorials. Keep learning, keep coding, keep growing. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.